I don't just talk about other people's stuff, I also make my own. Books in particular. To date, I have 4 books you can check out on Amazon. Operation Red Dragon: The Kaiju Wars Part 1, Occult Mafia, Emerald of Maddox City, and the short story collection Assorted Absurdities, Tales of Kaiju Punk and Other Genres. Hop on down to the description for Amazon links to all 4 books. Enjoy whichever ones you read, and enjoy the video.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am the Omni viewer, and since I've been trying to figure out my new equipment and adjusting audio levels and everything, I've kind of fallen behind when it comes to doing stuff like updates on recent kaiju news and things like that. Well, I think I've got the audio levels to a place where they're at least manageable. I've figured out how to get rid of stuff like the little timestamp in the corner that was in the last couple videos, so I guess for now I'm in good enough of a position that I can get back to doing that sort of thing. So, let's play a little catch-up, shall we? So the first bit of kaiju-related news was that a plot synopsis was revealed for Godzilla vs. Kong 2, or Origins, or whatever the title winds up being. Right now I'm just going to be calling it GVK2 because that's the simplest way to do it. Now, the plot synopsis basically speaks about how Godzilla and Kong, who are, again, both confirmed to be in the movie, will be teamed up, apparently, against a greater threat to the entire world, something that appears to stem from the Hollow Earth, and that the movie will explore more about the origins of their species. Now, I mean, that's a plot synopsis that feels kind of familiar to me. Because, like, thinking back to the marketing for Godzilla vs. Kong 1, can't believe that's how I'm referring to it now, but anyway, referring back to that, the original plot synopsis was very similar, talking about how it was going to explore the origins and how the monsters were going to face a threat that would wipe them all out. It's very similar. And I won't lie to you guys, it does have me a little concerned. Now, I know some of you have called me a monsterverse shill. I know some of you think that I give these movies way too much slack. I can't help if I enjoy them. It's just what I like. But that doesn't mean I haven't seen some warning signs about the monsterverse potentially falling apart as it moves forward. And the fact that our first plot synopsis for the next movie sounds like it's just rehashing what the original plot synopsis for the previous movie was, I do think that is a red flag. I won't lie to you. Now, granted, Godzilla vs. Kong clearly had a lot of stuff cut from it. It was so lean that there was almost no fat at all. So, in fact, they even cut away some of the actual meat. So, maybe it's just that they want to actually explore the stuff that they meant to explore in this last movie, but didn't get a chance to because the studio said, let's just focus on the title fight. So, if that's the case, hopefully it turns out well, but at the same time, I cannot rule out the possibility that this might be a sequel where they basically just took the script for the last movie, switched out a few things here and there, and are pretending like it's a brand new thing. Which is a problem that used to plague sequels quite a bit before the Marvel Cinematic Universe made long-form sequential storytelling mainstream in movie theaters. I don't know at this point. I just know that the plot synopsis sounded really familiar. But at the same time, it's also interesting that it says Godzilla and Kong will specifically team up. Now, it doesn't say which one the movie will focus on more. The previous little bits that we'd gotten and heard here and there seemed to suggest it would be more Kong-centric, and some people were thinking, well, maybe that just means Godzilla will have nothing more than a cameo. This synopsis, the way it reads, almost feels like it'll split the focus a bit more evenly, but at this point, who knows? We still know that Godzilla is going to be featured in the Apple TV Monarch series, and Kong's going to have an anime on Netflix, assuming Netflix doesn't cancel it. So, they're still sticking around, and they're both going to be in this movie. I just do wonder about that plot synopsis. But also, there's the question of what that new threat is going to be. Because they're going to be put against a new threat of some sort, presumably another kind of monster. I doubt they will go the Mechagodzilla route again. I mean, I certainly hope they won't. But what could that threat be? Naturally, the clickbaiters have been clickbaiting and putting monsters in their thumbnails that will entice people into thinking that it will be a monster that has been rumored to be in these movies since the first movie. Destroya, Space Godzilla, Biollante, Gigan, whatever monster you can think of that's been circling around for a while. We don't necessarily know that. For all we know, it could be a brand new monster, because the monsterverse has not been opposed to introducing new monsters. Part of the beauty of the kaiju genre, in fact, and part of the reason why I actually like it over something like comic book movies, is the fact that they do regularly introduce new elements. Whereas comic book adaptations are beholden almost in a religious way to the source material and very rarely introduce new characters. It does happen, but infrequently. But the fact is that they can introduce new characters and do on a regular basis. We don't know at this point. Maybe it will be a familiar monster. All we know at this point is that it's something that will require Godzilla and Kong to team up again, and this time not begrudgingly so. But we will see. That's update number 1. Update number 2 came as a surprise to just about everyone, when it was announced that a new King Kong series was being developed for Disney+. Again, everyone was thrown for a loop by this. Disney is making a King Kong series? I just imagine that the Universal executives are kicking themselves over letting Legendary exploit that legal loophole about King Kong technically being in the public domain, thus reminding everyone else about it. But anyway, Disney's making a TV series about King Kong. It's going to be set on Skull Island. Some of the sources I've seen state that it's actually adapting Kong, King of Skull Island, which I reviewed. Follow the links if you want to know more about this book. Shorts version, it's an illustrated novel that is both a sequel and prequel to the 1933 original film. But it's not a straight adaptation of the island and its mythology. There are a lot of liberties taken with the creatures you see and the tone and what exactly the nature of the monsters and Kong are, but it's really good, actually. Now, it does have quite a bit of material in it that could fill at least a season's worth of TV. But the real question is this meant to be like a limited series or an ongoing series? Because if it's an ongoing series, well, that could get interesting. I've seen what happens in the past when you try taking a finite book with a beginning, a middle, and an end, and use it as the basis for a potentially infinite TV series. By that I mean you want it to run for as long as possible. Eventually you run out of source material and you got to start adding new stuff. Best example I can think of that's comparable to this is Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's The Lost World. There was a Canadian TV series produced in the early 2000s, I believe, and it's an enjoyable series, but it goes completely bonkers as it goes on. Like, it starts off where it's pretty standard. You have the characters go to the plateau, there are dinosaurs, there are cavemen. The weirdest things they introduce are like there's a race of lizard people that also live there. But as the seasons progress, then you have the ruins of Atlantis and time travel portals and UFOs and the possessed knife of Jack the Ripper. They just throw everything onto this plateau. The plateau becomes Grand Central Station. But it again, fun series, but absolutely ridiculous. So, if the intent is to keep this King Kong series going as long as possible, is that what they're going to wind up doing? Well, they don't necessarily have to, because the King of Skull Island book actually is part of its own shared universe. There are two books which are actually in continuity with it. Not illustrated novels, though there is some illustration accompanying them, but rather prose novels. There's Doc Savage Skull Island, which is a prequel for both King Kong and the character of Doc Savage, showing them meeting back in the 20s, I believe. And yes, I am currently in the process of reading this. And King Kong versus Tarzan, which is sort of a midquel to the movie where they make a stop off in Africa while transporting King Kong from Skull Island, and he escapes, and the Lord of the Apes gets involved. I haven't started this one yet because I'm reading them in order. Now, these books, as mentioned, are in continuity with Kong King of Skull Island, but at the same time, they're also crossovers. And while I think Tarzan might be in the public domain, I think that's a little bit iffy at the moment, because the Burroughs estate might still retain certain rights to him. But Doc Savage, I believe, definitely is not. I don't think he's past that limit yet. So if Disney were to adapt these characters, they'd probably have to negotiate some rights again. Now, of course, Disney does have history with Tarzan. It wasn't one of their greatest movies, but it wasn't one of their worst either. They have no experience with Doc Savage. For a long time, he was at Warner Brothers. He was even under the DC banner for a little bit, along with the Shadow. And he stuck around longer than the Shadow at DC. But I don't necessarily know or believe even that these books would be part of the plan. So what is part of the plan? Who knows? For all we know, this series will wind up stuck in development hell. The only thing we know for now is that Disney is trying to adapt a King Kong series. In fact, it might only be using the King of Skull Island book as a jumping off point, assuming that's even true. It might just be a rumor. The series is in development, though, and we will see what happens. Given my feelings about the way Disney is currently doing things and has been doing them for a long time, I don't necessarily think that's going to entice me to subscribe to Disney+. But we will see what happens. That's update number 2. Finally, update number 3, the most recent update, involves... Well, it's not directly related to Kaiju or the monsterverse, but it could have an effect. Possibly. That's what people are thinking, but it might not necessarily work out that way. This particular bit of news is that Legendary is at least considering parting ways with Warner Brothers again and partnering up with another studio. Right now, the top 2 choices are either Sony or Paramount. And a lot of people are jumping onto this, and as you can imagine, they are taking it as 100% factual, definitely going to happen. They're saying, hey, if Legendary partners with Sony and brings the MonsterVerse there, we can have Godzilla 2014 versus Godzilla 1998, which, was always an option anyway, because Toho owns Godzilla 98, and Sony clearly had no qualms with them licensing out that character under the name of Zilla to appear in the IDW comics. Or they're saying, ooh, if he goes to Paramount, Godzilla versus Sonic the Hedgehog, baby. Now, most of this is probably just for fun. Though, if you are thinking that any of these crossovers will happen if Legendary pairs with one of these studios, don't hold your breath. However, there are certain things about this that aren't being taken into account just yet. First of all, Legendary has not actually finalized a split with Warner Brothers. It's being considered. It hasn't actually happened. And it's not necessarily going to happen. Right now, they're thinking of parting ways because as Warner has been acquired by AT&T and the new owners are basically cleaning house, as always happens when there's a studio merger of this sort, Legendary's basically decided they don't want any of their projects to get caught in the crossfire, so they're looking elsewhere. And that, in fact, might just be a negotiation tactic. Think of it this way. Suppose you want a raise at your job. You could just go to your boss, ask for a raise, and be laughed out the door by him. So that's not going to work necessarily. But there is another tactic you can do. You can go to a different place of employment, apply for a job there, fill everything out, do the interviews, get an offer, and then go back to your boss and say, hey, I got an offer to work at a rival company for this price. If you give me a raise that's maybe just a little bit less, but still more than I'm currently making, I'll stay. And the boss will decide, well, I don't want to lose you, so you've got your raise. I mean, we could be seeing something similar happening here. Legendary could be threatening to leave Warner Brothers because they actually don't want to leave Warner Brothers. They just want a better deal with Warner Brothers. We don't know at this point. Nor do we necessarily know that if they did split and go to another studio, that would mean the monsterverse would go with them. Let's not forget what happened the last time Legendary parted ways with Warner Brothers, because this has happened before. Legendary, almost as soon as Godzilla 2014 was done, said, bye Warner Brothers, we're going to partner with Universal now. Did Godzilla go with them? No. Godzilla 2 remained in development at Warner Brothers. That tells me that the deal involving the King of the Monsters specifically is not just between Toho and Legendary, it's between Toho, Legendary, and Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers is, of course, footing a portion of the bill to produce the Monsterverse. It's not a purely Legendary production. Warner Brothers does have a vested interest in this. They are putting money directly into it. In fact, the Monsterverse didn't even exist until Legendary proposed a King Kong movie at Universal. Universal turned them down because they had Tom Cruise and the Mummy. That was going to be their big money maker. So instead, they took advantage of that aforementioned legal loophole, went back to Warner Brothers and said, hey, how about a crossover? And Warner Brothers said, you had me at hello. And thus the Monsterverse was born. So it wasn't a full break to begin with, but also it was clear that Universal had no interest in doing anything of the giant monster variety. Well, okay, they tried with Pacific Rim, but we all remember how that turned out. But the point is, Legendary didn't just continue doing what they had always done at a different studio. They had to go back to Warner Brothers in order for the Monsterverse to happen. Which means the Monsterverse is not just a Legendary thing. It's not purely a Legendary thing. They may be the primary force behind it, but it's mostly a Warner Brothers production. The current Godzilla vs. Kong 2 movie is still being produced at Warner Brothers. So clearly, even as the new ownership are shelving projects left and right, whether they're just starting production or are practically finished, and yet for some reason they're keeping Ezra Miller's Flash around, that movie in particular appears to be safe. It is not lost on the new owners that Godzilla vs. Kong is the movie that brought people back into theaters. And the new ownership has said they want to put a greater emphasis on theatrical movies, having theatrical movies be events again. So clearly Godzilla vs. Kong 2 is in the clear. But it also seems to be that Warner Brothers does want them to stick around. Now true, there are some Monsterverse projects that have gone to different companies. Monarch is being produced at HBO Max, Skull Island Anime is on Netflix. I don't know the particulars of why those are happening and not being put on HBO Max, but that's just the way it is. Either way, the movies at least are safe. But let's assume for a moment that it is a clean break, that Legendary completely severs ties with Warner Brothers, and that means Warner Brothers no longer has access to any projects that are being produced by Legendary. That doesn't necessarily mean the Monsterverse is going to go to a different studio. Not because Warner Brothers would hold on to it, but because that new studio might not want anything to do with it. Let's not forget, Universal turned down the chance to make a King Kong movie, and King Kong is largely considered to be a Universal monster. You see, the way movies get produced and the way they get canceled depends on who's in charge. A movie gets greenlit if somebody goes to the producer, pitches the idea, and the producer says, yes, I believe in this project and I believe it will make money, so I am going to back this thing. If they are not interested, if they don't think the project is going to work, it doesn't get greenlit. The monsterverse, well, the movies that would eventually become the monsterverse were backed by Warner Brothers. And even with the change in hierarchy, they're still being backed by Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers, regardless of whether it's the old guard or the new guard, clearly think that these movies are worth keeping, are worth holding on to. We don't necessarily know that the people at Sony or Paramount feel the same way. Sony currently has all of its eggs in the Spider-Man basket. Well, the Spider-Man villain basket specifically, even though it hasn't actually done them much good. The first Venom was like a moderate success. Venom Let There Be Carnage. I mean, when was the last time you even thought about that movie? And of course, It's Morbin Time was a disaster that couldn't even be saved by internet memes. But they still appear to be going forward with it no matter what. And after No Way Home did gangbusters, they're not going to let that go anytime soon. If they're going all in on Spider-Man, are they necessarily going to be that interested in Godzilla? They were interested in Godzilla a couple decades ago, but not anymore. Last time Sony did anything that directly involved Godzilla, it really hurt their bottom line. So they might not be in any rush to have history repeat itself. And as for Paramount, well, Paramount still appears to be doing Transformers movies, which are giant monster adjacent, but not really kaiju movies. And of course, they've got Sonic the Hedgehog right now. But are they going to be interested in Godzilla and King Kong and whatever other monsters Legendary might have in the roster? Again, that's not necessarily guaranteed. It all depends on whether or not the people in charge get the projects. If they don't, the projects get shelved or set aside. Or, worst case scenario, they get picked up by the new studio and then placed in the vault just because they don't want another studio getting their hands on it. That happens far more often than you might think. So, the bottom line here is that just because Legendary is threatening to leave Warner Brothers, that doesn't mean they actually will, and it doesn't mean the Monsterverse will go with them if they do. But we will see. I don't know the inner workings of this deal any more than the lot of you do. All I know is what I have observed in the past, and I'm trying to apply it to what I see happening here. Anyway, enough of my rambling. I've got a lot more I need to do. Until such time as we meet again, this is the Omni Viewer signing off.
Congratulations, you reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, you might want to consider supporting us on Patreon. Of course, the other way to support us is to go to Amazon and check out our books, Operation Red Dragon, The Kaiju Wars Part 1, The Occult Mafia, Emerald of Maddox City, and Assorted Absurdities, Tales of Kaiju Punk and Other Genres. Also check the description for links to DeviantArt and other platforms we operate. Thank you all for watching. We'll see you next time.